And so from here, we move on to the next one, which is the Nigerian economy. Kelly has this one.
Well, absolutely. We have explored the foundations of Nigeria's legal system. So let's get to take a look at Nigeria, another critical pillar of national development, which is Nigeria's economy. We're joined this hour by Professor Ken Ife. He's an economist, lead consultant, ECOWAS Commission, and chief promoter, Biosources. Thank you indeed, Prof, for joining us on the program. I'm not exactly sure where to begin this conversation from because there's so much for us to dissect with you as regards the state of Nigeria's economy. Well, let's begin with something that looks like good news on paper, and that has to do with Nigeria's foreign reserves. It surged to $51.89 billion in 17 years. This looks good on paper. It looks like the government is getting things right, some would say, but for many others, it doesn't translate to putting food on the table. Prof.
Yeah, I still share the same sentiment that we need to make sure that those macroeconomic gains put food on the table. But it's a brilliant news, actually. You can't take it away from central bank because you need to see where they started. Chicken, if a chicken will say, if you don't know where it starts beating you, you probably don't know when it stops beating you. So what happened was that in 2023, when they came in, our foreign reserve was at the lowest, I think just around $30 billion. Sometimes they say 27, 20. But what was more important is that the net reserve was just a little over $3 billion. And it was spreading panic worldwide on Nigeria's financial credibility. But what happened now is it's rebuilt, is now about 40 billion net reserve. And the administration came in to meet over $7 billion debt that they have to pay. And then they dealt with that. And then from then onwards is actually good news. But this $51.689 billion is not actually the highest. Because if you remember, around that 2008, around that time, we had $62 billion in our reserve and about $22 billion in our excess crude account. Now, nobody talks about excess crude account. Now, they don't want it because that is usually where you have accretion to reserves. But if you notice that was the time when we had this crisis, the American subprime property crisis that nearly melted down our banks. So Sanusi was there, and then he took charge and then set up AMCON. And the AMCON rescued all those banks. Public 6 trillion naira went into it. We haven't still got that money back, the only part of it. But nevertheless, it has solved its purpose. Immediately after that, we started having our crisis again. Now, is it necessary to celebrate this? Absolutely, because you have to start from the good news as you move to face the biggest challenges our economy is facing. What have contributed to this? There has been increased receipt from crude sales. As you know, the crisis is here again, and then we are benefiting from higher crude prices. We're also, government is also tightening the noose on a revenue collection, so that is also reducing some pressures. Then the bank has also normalized what the president asked them to do from day one. They have done to align the exchange rates. So they now have fixed, not fixed, but reasonably price exchange rate and steady. And that means foreign portfolio investment are conveniently coming in, of course, at the cost of very high interest rates and monetary policy rates. So that notwithstanding, we're having that. So that is cushioning our forex, and the central bank has worked extremely hard to ensure that they go around with the banks and the diaspora communities to encourage inflow, and they are now confident that we could get as much as $1 billion a month. So that would be good news as well. So there are other things, lots of things that the central bank is doing, and squeezing the monetary policy is so tight that we still have to urge them to, at some point, to loosen the belt so that the MSMEs will breathe in some areas. But that notwithstanding, we can't take it away from the central bank. They've done very well on that score.
Yeah, Prof, perhaps is the strategy that the government, in terms of the fiscal and monetary authorities, have adopted perhaps effects of creation, because no matter how you want to look at it, one will suffer for the other. So for high interest rates and stable effects, that naturally will attract some of these things we're talking about, maybe for copy traders. And when you look at our treasury bills and some of those things we sell as instrument or will issue as instrument, and the high interest comes. So it will naturally bring all of these guys in. So I don't know whether it is strategy of government to focus on inflows so that we can cushion the impact of the demand for those inflows. That's on one hand. But there's another part I want you to speak to, and I was trying to get to the Nigerian constitution. I hope I can do that within the time. And that has to do with, if you look at section 16 of the Nigerian constitution, it panders towards a welfare state, because you see that it advises strongly that income distribution is super important. In fact, the fiscal policies must be adopted such that in terms of economic policies of government, there is no income inequality. But you and I know that the income inequality is worlds apart. So in terms of reconciling this income inequality, because sometimes people argue that it may not entirely be a poverty problem, but it could also be an inequality problem because we're rated as a low middle income society. How do we bridge that? How do we redistribute our wealth effectively to close this inequality gap in terms of income distribution?
I'm really sorry. You haven't actually created the wealth. So what are you distributing? That's the big challenge. So if you look at the cycle is investment. And that investment has to go to productive activity. That productive activity creates employment. Employment creates disposable income. And from disposable income, you can tackle poverty. You can use it to pay for education, pay for health, pay for all this poverty reduction. That is the kind of economy that you have chosen. We are working on a free capitalist economy. You are not talking about command economy. So that's number one. So the issue is this: where are your investments? And are these investments going into productive activity? Who needs to make the investment? Investments are made by private sector and public sector. So take it one after another. If the public sector is making investment, where is it? I haven't seen that investment from their receivables. I'm seeing the investment from borrowing. So if you are borrowing, what is the integrity of that borrowing in relation to the fiscal law? And is that borrowing going predominantly to productive activities in such a way that it could generate those employment and then reduce poverty sustainably? Or is it going to areas where you are going to be challenged in terms of its impact and then how much extra load it puts on debt service? So put that by the side. Now, private sector, they are going to invest. What the first development plan, 2021 to 2025, wanted government to have 350 trillion naira investment. But of that, 50 trillion is all levels of government and 200 trillion were to come from private sector. I don't know where we are with that one, but that period has gone. But I can tell you, we didn't go anywhere near what we projected. Now we are moving into another one where what is expected is 1,700 trillion naira investment, of which 82% is going to come from private sector. So if private sector is being required to put as much as 82 to 85%, what are the enabling environments that will encourage them? Where are the macro and micro issues that are being addressed that will encourage them to invest? And those who are investing, how are you treating them? So you're going to have to look at that, honestly. Because if you begin to look at the PPPs that have come in, look at the massive investment that have changed the landscape, for example, Dangote's investment, and then you're going to say, how are you treating him? And then there are many others running on the back of that investment from 20 billion. By next year, it will go to 40 billion. 50 billion is going to Ondo for a new refinery. Bua is doing 200,000 barrels in oil. When you add all that, people are coming here to put money. How are you treating them? Are they happy? What can you make them to be happier so that more investment will come? And we know we have challenge. We are getting portfolio investment today, but we are not getting foreign direct investment, which will resonate with the private sector investment I'm talking about. So if we are not getting foreign direct investment, why? And what can you do? So what can you do? And we are not answering those questions. Then you come to the welfare state. Now, in economic development, there are always two lanes. The first lane, where entrepreneurship and governance policy drive on investment. Then you have the slow lane, where you have to take care of the disabled, the less privileged people. So that is where you are addressing the social safety net is coming from. But it is important to cater for the weakest in our community. But you couldn't do that at the expense of improving productivity and increasing investment, because sustainably, for you to sustainably do this, you're going to have to follow the cycle I described before. Investment that goes to productive capacity creates employment, employment creates disposable income is available to deal with this matter in a sustainable way. That is not what, you've got to get a balance. As the Second World War ended, Labour came in the UK, just to give you an example. And then they decided, well, we can't have our retirees, 75 years old, being in the street begging. So they started to stop that and started issuing benefits. But from there, new political arrangements, as they come, everybody pledges and pledges. From 75 years, it came down to 65 to 60 years. From there, they started adding widows and the single parent families. They go on benefit. Oh, unemployed people, they go. You can add, but you cannot take away. That is the danger. That today you are not, and even a week ago, I was also hearing World Bank is giving over $2 or $3 billion. That is going to continue, and that is going to exacerbate. And then you now have a situation where the UK population have become aged, and you don't have enough young people with enough good jobs to be able to service that welfare state. And even America is having the same situation. So they are beginning to say, oh, let's do all this to bring people in. That is where you are going to be heading. You're going to be heading to an unsustainable public expenditure profile that tilts to the way of welfare state without actually creating the economic opportunity that is going to create the jobs. And that is number one danger. But the biggest danger facing you are two people. One, NNPC. And that's why in 2023, when we were inaugurated in the Presidential Governing Council of Ministry of Finance and Corporation, I said they should go to capital market. Because the shenanigan around NNPC has gone on for too long, for over 25 years. Go to capital market so that people will see you, transparency, and they'll start sorting out what you need to do. They are not doing what we need to do. But let me not spend your time on this. But if we have time, I can get back and give you the details of how dangerous that company has been to the country and how you can track all the woes in our economy to that one country. Don't forget, NNPC accounts for 90% of your forex earning. Because 79% is from crude, 11% is from gas. It's only 10% that is available to us. And CBN has worked very hard to increase that money and bring us to where we are. But we could do more.
Yeah.
We could do more.
So you're fingering lack of commitments to creating wealth opportunities here. And you know, the Guardian this morning supports the start of our commentary on this particular segment in its headline, which says, battle for excess liquidity, DMO Dangote mobilized 11 trillion naira in 6 months as real sector suffers. And we could talk about even the banking sector declaring profits annually, you know, but we do not see the same wealth in the real sector, which really is the backbone of the economy. But I'd like you to speak to, you know, the seeming contradiction in the results as against what the political commitment is. We've heard the wife of the president talk about grants to people to start off small businesses, the Akara comment for which she received a lot of backlash. We see some state governments, you know, also provide some interventions in terms of perhaps loans and grants to the MSMEs sector. Why do these efforts, combined with the government's social investment program, why do these efforts not translate into significant outcomes for the real sector?
I'm glad you actually went in there to talk about the real sector. Let me tell you what the biggest challenge in our economy is. One is because we have an import-dependent economy. When you have an import-dependent economy, especially where the dependency is around your natural endowment, then you've had it. God gave you some raw materials. God wasn't joking. He gave you some raw materials, oil, gas, 44 solid minerals, and then agroecology that is favorable to producing food, even without working as hard. And you decided to waive your right to add value to those. You decided to send all those out to somebody elsewhere in the global north to process it for you and bring it down for you to consume. Let me tell you what you have done. You have decided that all your export of raw materials are equal to exporting jobs and importing poverty. And then even if you look at, you see, the reason why we are not developing is because we have not focused on value chain. Wealth is built on value chains. The man that controls the value chain and adds value is the man that creates the wealth. All you are doing is that you are sending out raw material, and then you are not adding. The highest value you can get in a value chain for selling or exporting raw material is 10%. Maybe if you are lucky, you get 15%. But you are going to borrow money to go and buy 100% of the product when it is processed and sent back to you. So the people that make the money are the people who sit behind your export, and then when they re-export back value to you. So that is the missing link. Our economy is import dependent, and you can't get away. And the strategy to deal with this is export-led growth strategy. If you tell me that your strategy is to invest in production to meet local demand, forget it. You haven't even understood what is going on. It is when you are focused on export of whatever God has given you, add value and export it, then you stand the chance of removing 400 million people out of poverty as China did, removing 200 million out of poverty as India did, and then when you now add Malaysia, Indonesia, South Korea, Japan, all of them together is almost around 200 million. That is the strategy that gets them out of unemployment. That's the strategy that creates wealth. That's the strategy that forces all your research and development activity to create more standards, more product. That is it. That is when you talk. But if you are going around it, sharing money here, doing that, you are not dealing with the challenge of the economy. And then for you to actually address that particular import substitution agenda, you have to make sure that you do what in ECOWAS, we are doing 30% value addition for you to accede to our ETLS. And actually, Africa Continental Free Trade is requiring 40%. So Nigerian Senate and the House of Parliament passed a bill of 30% mandatory value addition and sent it to the president since last year. For over 10 months, almost 10 months now, he's been sitting there, he hasn't signed it, and they don't want to invoke their power to pass it. Now, why it is important is that if you add 30% value, the $6.1 billion you are earning from export of this raw material will increase to over $20 billion just by adding 30% value. And then you will now encourage people who genuinely want to bring in equipment here and manufacture for those things that they know the raw material will be here. Not to come and bring their equipment and then you are busy exporting the raw material they brought equipment to us to do. So we are not helping ourselves. That is the beginning. And then you will say you can give grace period if there are particular contracts or particular things standing on the way. You can give them some grace period, but you have to move. Okay, you took action against shea butter. Take action against all raw materials and then give the exceptions that you want to give, and then let's move. So they can have investment, open investment to come in. And in the same way, you have to do something about OPEC, because OPEC is going to block big investment that will come upstream to come and produce the crude that will be refined by the amassing crude refinery capacity in Nigeria. And by the way, we should stop lamenting, stop reading from the book of Lamentation on what is going on in Iran. What is your business with Iran? Promote Guinea, Gulf of Guinea, starting from Angola through Congo, Cameroon, Equatorial Guinea, Nigeria, all the way to Ghana.
Prof.
That is a heavy, we have a concentration of gas and crude, and we have massive refining. That's what you should be promoting, and not talking about Iran war. Why are you wasting your time talking about Iran war?
So, Prof, I don't know, since you've brought in the OPEC conversation, United Arab Emirates, they have exited that platform. I wonder if you think that we also need to exit that platform. My second question will also just be quickly that historically, I'm not sure we've had it this bad in a long time. There are those who argue that it looks like we have very fantastic policies or fantastic economic reforms that by this current administration, but it looks like we are having these fantastic policies and economic reforms on a weak and faulty foundation. And for a house who has such a faulty foundation or weak foundation, a collapse, perhaps, may be inevitable in the future. Is that what you see?
No, that's not what I see. The collapse was in 2023, when Nigeria was on intensive unit, our economy was on intensive unit, and actually sitting on a cliff. So it was just a matter of a week or so, it was going to crash. So what we now have today is the country has come out of that cliff, come out of intensive unit, and is in a recovery position. And apart from doing that, look, there are three dimensions of our economy that if you want to seriously evaluate it, one is the political economy end, where this administration, in all fairness, has actually moved Nigeria, the one that has moved this closest to fiscal autonomy. Because you have regional development agencies, you have the state that are getting more money. The Supreme Court says give their money to the local government. You have RDAs, we are formed immediately. The 3 times more revenue is going to states. Everything that you have a new development plan that is saying, whoa, move away from federal control. Let's move to sub. And then you're going to be world-based. So a lot of things are going on there, and you need to commend those. You come to the macroeconomy, the second one. The macroeconomy is good news. I've started by enumerating it. Inflation is under control, exchange rate steady, more money is coming. You can see the reserve going up, and then all the rating agencies, you can't fool them. They are ticking good. But the third one, the fiscal, the micro, is where you have the challenge, because they are not translating to more jobs. They are not translating to poverty reduction. Instead, they are borrowing money to share for poverty reduction. These things should naturally lead to high employment, but it's because you have not addressed the two elephants in the room. That what NNPC has been doing, and then why you are still import dependent. So the strategy has to be export-led growth strategy, and then you have to tame NNPC so that it will behave itself, because you cannot have massive investment coming into the downstream and midstream to help this country, and you are blocking it, and you are giving priority to importing substandard where you are strangulating the huge investments coming in. You won't give them crude. It's unbelievable. It is unbelievable.
Well, Prof, it sounds like desperate times indeed for many Nigerians. I saw a report over the weekend that says that about 70% of Nigerians earn less than 100,000 naira, and I'm wondering, how are they able to even navigate these economic hardship at this time? But we must anchor here, because our inflation as well, you have described it as not a straightforward inflation narration. You said our inflation is a complex stagflation case, I think sometime last year. But let's leave it here. Professor Ken Ife is a development economist. He's also the lead consultant, ECOWAS Commission, and chief promoter, Biosources. Thank you indeed for your insights, as always, on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, this is the morning brief. Let's take a moment now. When we come back, we'll turn our attention to something else. It has to do with our international relations with South Africa. Mr. President has been talking tough over the weekend about xenophobic attacks. We'll tell you all about it in just a moment. Please stay with us.